Probably will take a few seconds, and then there we go. All right. So thanks again, everybody, for joining our latest Show and Tell. This is sprint feedback session number 3. The reason why we've given it a slightly different name is because we want to be clear that we do want to hear from our stakeholders, from you, about how we're doing. We do catch up with you a lot anyway about how we're doing, but particularly in these sessions, it would just be great to hear from everybody and for people to share their thoughts. So please, no question is a silly question, and please feel free to ask away. So on the agenda for today, so we're going to go through our project goals, the sprint focus, and what the delivery plan is, how we're doing against that, what our focus is on the next sprint, and obviously time at the end for any more detailed feedback or Q&A. But we would also be happy to take questions as we go along. If you've got something burning, just please put your hand up. So the team, yes, the team, we are mostly here today. So we've kind of shared this slide before, but it's obviously a collaboration between Alex and Craig Rushmore, along with the Zyzie team here, and with our wider stakeholders that feed into and inform our plans, most of whom who are on this call. So welcome, hello, nice to see you again. Ariba.
Hi everyone, hope you're all well. So last time we discussed these problem statements, and I'd just like to recap on them because they still hold the same significance throughout the project. And it's around, you know, what's the problem that we're trying to address and solve. So at the bottom of the screen, you'll see that that is what we came to at the end of our kickoff workshop, and that is what we're following through for our criteria in whatever activities we take forward in this project. But really the crux of it is the license holders are finding it challenging to manage their license. The license holders would need a service that is more mobile and interactive and desirable, and the licensing team spends a large proportion of their time chasing license holders, and this can vary, the processes can vary from council to council. So that's the problem that we're trying to solve, to make the drivers more license holders more proactive, and in turn meet the need of the licensing teams of having to chase many people. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we set out with some alpha goals. We want to improve the proactiveness of the license holders, and we will test that by putting a prototype in front of them and kind of placing some findings on top of that to understand whether, you know, if we were to offer this digital service, what would that mean? Would it mean that they would use it? We're going to try and understand what simplicity and desirable means to them. We've already had those conversations where we put an earlier prototype out in front of them, and we will be working to design or refine we're designing a new one to kind of take forward to them again for a second round of testing. And then, you know, it's to improve the efficiency across the councils. We want to create alignment within the councils. We want the councils to learn and share with each other, and basically design a process that is more streamlined. We do have the goal of reducing time on the back-end processes. However, the back-end processes are many, and the ones that we will focus on and prioritize are those that directly impact the license holders. So that's it from me. So these are on the right are the hypotheses that we're testing, and we'll feedback on those at every stage of the project. With that, I will hand over to Verity, I believe.
Yes. Thank you very much, Ariba. So Sprint 3 has been really productive and fruitful in meeting goals and objectives as we continue in this project. The goals of this sprint were license holder interviews, license holder research synthesis, and round 2 user research recruitment as well. Next slide for me. Thank you. It should be like, yes, perfect. So in the previous sprint, we met with the council several times to understand their pain points and needs, but also gain an understanding of what improvements they felt were needed, what works well, the amount of time they currently spend chasing license holder, using uniform in their processing, and what they feel a digital service must do to alleviate both their pressures, but also correctly serve license holders. So if we go with the list of needs on the left, and I'll read out a few of each: an extremely simple service for drivers to use, a reliable online service so that the licensing team can work on their own enforcement tasks, create digital confidence, and also reduce time spent of chasing those license holders. If we look at the pain points, we can see that there's a greater number and a greater problem there, which is a lack of responsibility from drivers, low digital license holders, recurring unnecessary contact from drivers as well, and again the chasing and having to handhold as well. This is a problem, of course, because this creates a bigger need to constantly have to be leaving the tasks that they need to do and to handhold those drivers. Next slide, please, Julia. Thank you. So we conducted interviews across all three councils. The below table summarizes those participant profiles that met our high focus criteria. So as you can see here, we met with one-man bands, we met with private hire and Hackney carriage license holders, and we also met with a few operators as well. Next slide, please, for me, Julia. So last week internally, we began synthesizing and theming those research sessions that we conducted. We divided those themes into managing a license, communication with your council, pain points and benefits, and attitudes towards a digital service. These themes were a direct parallel to the meetings that we had with those licensing teams previously. These themes shaped our user discussion guide as well, but also will come into play later when we are going through and creating that prototype. Once theming was complete, again, internally with the Anxiety team, we were able to see our headline findings for council licensed members. So if we go to the next slide, you will be able to see that these were the common things for all the participants. The ones in bold are the most pressing, and again, will hopefully shape our later prototype. These headline findings also helped us to look at our user needs, which I will share in just a second. But as you can see, even though these are three different areas, with North Tyneside being the furthest away from Basingstoke and Rushmore, they all wanted a simple service when they can do something as simple as know when they have to do their renewals and also upload those documents. So they aren't massive asks, but they are genuinely what it is that they need the most from this service. So if we go to our next slide. Thank you, Julia. Theme, outcomes, and patterns always come to light when going through research, and it was no different with these license holders. Even though it was a smaller number, we still found plenty of patterns that would help shape how we were going to go forward. So we have been able to create key user needs stories for how we want to shape that service, meet those project goals, and solidify those user experiences. So if I was to read out a few of them, as a license holder, I need to know the status of my application so I can know how long I'll be off the road. As a license holder with dyslexia, I need application forms to be as simple and streamlined as possible, so I'm able to complete them on my own with very little stress. And as a license holder who holds an operator license, I need to know the status of my driver's applications so I can make sure that they're not off the road for a long time and losing pay. So even though the user needs stories, we could create many, many more, these ones very much tie in with what we had discussed previously with those licensing teams around what is needed. I think one of the biggest things that we have found is that talk around digital literacy. There's a real problem there. And it's one of the key things that the licensing teams have said to us is that if we can just create a really simple service so that the footfall into the office is less, so that the hand-holding is less, so that the chasing is less, so that they'll be able to do something as simple as submit documents and not make mistakes. These are all things that would help to make this service really that much more succinct, but also that much more useful to everyone involved. And it would also mean that these drivers themselves start to create their own sense of confidence, and also they will start to develop an understanding of why self-service is so helpful in shaping how you are as someone who has to complete a service, as someone who has to do their own day-to-day, and as someone who needs to be in control of what they do. So as I pass over to Ash in just a moment, we are looking at ways, and using these stories help that, to see how we can touch as much as possible in different ways to make sure that at the forefront of everything is ease, is use, but it's also self-confidence, as I said previously. So now I'll pass over to Ash.
Thanks, Verity. Yeah, so desirability is something we've spoken about quite a lot in this project, and Verity's just spoken there about some of the needs that we found in the research that we were just doing from both license holders and the licensing teams. So now we're at a point where we can get all that feedback, we can start coming up with ideas on how we can improve the current prototype and the offering that we want to test with the license holders in the next round. So next sprint, which we're at quite a unique position with the show and tell, because we had to move the Tuesday show and tell to today because we were doing a workshop. But what this means is we've already kind of started on this sprint already, so I can give you a bit of a sneak peek on what we've been doing since Tuesday. So the goals of this sprint are really around planning the user research for the next round and also creating the prototype that we want to test. So like I said a second ago, in order for us to know what we want to put in the new prototype, we have to analyse all the past findings, which Verity's just been through, but also coming up with ideas. So how might we combat some of the problems that the license holders had with the last prototype, and what might that look like, which is what my challenge is going to be for this sprint. So next slide, please, Julia. So some of you will have been in contact with already, but one thing we found really useful from the last round of research was that we did recruit people through surveys, which was great, and we got a great turnout and response across all the councils. But we did have a no-show in North Tyneside, and we ended up going to one of the ranks because we had a bit of extra time. And actually the people that we managed to get hold of at the ranks had lower digital literacy than the people who had been coming in the office. Naturally, we kind of expected that because we'd recruited people through digital means on this round. But what it means is, rather than previously where we thought maybe we'd do remote sessions for this second round, we're actually going to do them in person again, because we felt going to the ranks and speaking to the people that weren't as confident with digital was super useful. And I think it's really important just to make sure that whatever prototype we create, they can use and it's simple. So who we want to meet this time, like I said, is low digital users. We did that rank visit in North Tyneside and it was very useful. So we're keen to do that at the other locations on this round as well. The people that we haven't really had much contact with up to now is license holders where English is their second language. So that is something we want to try and address for this round. We're hoping we can cover some of that at the ranks. Naturally, I think the way we recruited people last time with the screener, as I say, might have been a barrier to some groups of people. So we're hoping to try and combat that this time. So we're going to do basically at each of the councils. I've got dates a bit later on in case anyone's interested and wants to know, but we're planning on doing some actual sessions in the office, but then do ranks on the other part of the day. There's a mix between how we're going to split that morning and afternoon, but we're going to try and do rank visits and interviews for this next round for prototype testing. Next slide, Julia. So like I said before, we're at a good point here where I can show you a sneak peek of what we've already started this sprint. So from the insights that Verity and Bradley analysed for us from the user research, we did a workshop earlier this week around where we saw some of the barriers and some of the feedback that the license holders had around the prototype and how might we be able to combat those with the new prototype. Some of these things were things like the last prototype was very text heavy. Though the content was actually very useful for the license holders, they couldn't easily look at it and simply see what they were looking at. They had to actually read through it all, which was a bit of a cognitive overload for them. So one of the principles that I'm taking forward for the prototype is, can we make things more visual? Whether that's icons, whether that's just displaying it so it's not as text heavy, how can we make it look simpler for the drivers? Other ways are trying to show them where things are at in the process at the moment, whether that's applications or whether that's managing licenses. That's a discussion that we're having at the moment. There was an assumption from drivers when we were talking about the project that applications would be involved in that. That isn't in the scope of the project, but we are having discussions at the moment about whether that is something we wanted to take forward, discuss. So I'm sure we'll be in touch with that over the next week or so to discuss that with you all around feelings around that. But yeah, the main takeaway was around how can we make this simpler for the drivers, because the actual content worked for them on the prototype. They just got a little bit lost clicking through it. And with it being very text heavy, they needed it a little bit simpler than what it was at the time. So yeah, I've started working on the designs for those already, and we should have something to show you early next week for some feedback. So like I say, we're working on the prototype design and build at the moment, which is technically next sprint with this prototype. So trying to incorporate that feedback and ideas from round one and really make it as successful as we can for the testing. And then equally planning in that second round of testing. So at the moment, we've got Basingstoke down for the 14th of September, Rushmore the 15th, and North Tyneside Tuesday the 19th. So Verity's been working really hard to try and do some recruitment for that. So last time we did the screener, we got people to say whether they were up for this round of testing, but also whether they'd be interested in future rounds. So we've approached those people already to try and see whether we can get those without sending another screener out or through other methods of recruitment. So fingers crossed we can get people with that. Otherwise, we will be in touch around other ways we can try and get hold of people as well. But that's the plan. That's where we're up to.
Thanks, Sash. So just a quick look at the delivery plan. We're in sprint 4 now. We're kind of past, well, fairly past the halfway point. In terms of where we are with things such as the service blueprint, what we've done, and just to explain how we work, is we've done enough of that to get to where we are now, but we haven't completely finished it. So although it looks like a block on the Gantt chart, and it looks like it's well past and we've done it, we actually need to do a bit more work. What we've done this sprint, as Ash has just mentioned, is prioritize the prototyping, because if we don't focus on that and getting that in front of users and getting feedback and focusing on the service blueprint, there isn't much value in it, because we've done enough of that work. However, the service blueprint should be finished by the end of the project, but we're trying to make sure that we focus on getting something into the hands of users as soon as possible. So that's why it may look like we haven't done that quite yet, but otherwise we appear to be on track, and we're focusing on the prototype this sprint, as Ash said. And that's all really for the delivery plan. Thank you so much for being here and your questions. Well timed, Robert. Please come through with your question.
Yeah, apologies for flitting in and out. I've had a few little IT moments, so I'm just on my second reboot. Just a question about our test candidates. Just wondering whether there is a risk of learnt improvement for our drivers if we're reusing the same drivers for our feedback. You know, they look at the system, they, you know, each time they do it, they get a bit better at it, as well as us giving them a better product potentially, and whether that might give us some false positives.
Yeah, for sure, I can take that. I probably didn't explain it very well. So last time when we did the screener, we said to people, would you be up for doing research at the time, and would they be up for doing research in the future? So for this round, we're going to not speak to people that we spoke to last time, but the people who got in touch with us previously. So the people who couldn't come and make the dates last time, but said that they could do it in the future. So yeah, we also had that discussion earlier this week around the preference of not speaking to the same people.
Good, great minds think alike. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we had another hand up, but it might have just gone down. I don't know if that answered the other person's question, Andy.
Sorry, it was me with the wonderful world of Teams. So you're not alone. Everyone's having challenges. I was really interested. So just to introduce myself, I'm Andy. I'm from DLAC. I'm part of the local digital fund team. And I was really interested to learn more about your experience of your Gorilla UX testing. And just curious to hear about your experiences of that, of your like ability to record and document what happens when you're doing something like that, where you're doing proper like field work. You've got a prototype that's, I'm guessing, running off of a mobile phone, and how you approach sort of like documenting and recording what's happening.
Yes, so when we did the field research, I'll take this one mainly because I did the one at Enough Tyneside. So in the office, it was fine. We were showing it on the screen. When we went out to the field, we did it more as paper prototypes because it was more concept testing that we really wanted to test with them. So they didn't need to click through anything. It was more just getting their initial ideas. For this round, we are going to be doing it via a tablet. So we're just going through on our side at the moment to get that signed off, making sure it's secure. But that's what we're thinking for the visit. So we're going to have our own quite small tablet, but I'm going to make sure the prototype fits on it and everything works on there as well, that we can take with them and get them to go through and actually see how they progress through the application rather than just the concepts. So yeah, that's the plan of what we're doing this time around.
That's really cool. Thank you for sharing that, Ashley. It was really great to hear about, and I always encourage doing things like that sort of guerrilla style testing, because you do get unexpected outcomes. Something that I was wondering was whether, in terms of being able to understand the viability of this, so looking at that longer term thing of the objective of there's a chance here where we can develop something which is applicable to all councils across the country. Is there any just sort of practical benefit of recognizing that taxi driver is a taxi driver, and you can kind of go to any cab rank in the country to be able to get faster iterations on your feedback, so you haven't got to organize those appointments to view, so to speak, in key areas, and just whether that geographic restriction limits your ability to like canvas the quickly and be able to sort of learn faster.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Ariba could probably talk as well about this around, I think we're definitely going to have recommendations towards the end around whether we want to test this out across the country at different councils. I think we were talking about that recently. For me personally, I've thought about this because I'm based in Manchester. Like, it would be very easy for me to just go around and speak to the taxi drivers around here. I guess for the purpose of this project, we really wanted to make sure it catered for the current councils to then take into account the future ones, but our potential future ones anyway. But yeah, definitely, I think when we came into this, we didn't know if there'd be different needs across the councils, so we really wanted to keep it specific. But I think looking forward in the future, maybe Ariba can talk about maybe a bit of the final report and whether we're going to do recommendations around that. I don't see why we couldn't do that and see whether it applied across everyone. The way we've done it is there's quite a low barrier to entry when we're doing the testing, so we could literally just show people and see what they thought. Is how we're trying to do it. So yeah, it's an interesting chat.
Great, thanks, Andy. A couple more people with their hands up. Alex.
Yeah, I just wanted to come in further on what Andy had asked about. We've obviously got this alpha building upon some work that was done in Rushmore, and we did quite a bit of that guerrilla research. It was helpful for us that we had a rank about 500 yards away from the office front door. So yeah, we were able to get out there, and that proved very effective. And in our case, we had the HTML prototype, which you may have seen, and we were actually asking them to go to that URL on their own device, and that was really valuable because we could see how things like I think we had with the iPhone problems with the banner being displayed, so you get that real feedback of how it actually works on the device they'll be using, which was really useful. But it's a great point you raise about the nature of this user group. They're unusual compared to some services because they're out there and you can go and find them in specific places. And as was noted, we haven't examined the application process here for various reasons. But I suppose one of those is it's quite a challenge to find people who are thinking about becoming a taxi driver versus those who are already taxi drivers. So yeah, it's all an interesting landscape within this bit of research. But thanks for the question. Back to you, Julia.
Thanks, Alex. Robert, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I suppose my only reservation about that is that taxi drivers are easily confused. And if you start just randomly approaching drivers on random ranks, then you're going to set quite a few hairs running, he said, for those licensing authorities who you've just ambushed their drivers. And I think that you just have to do that with a fair degree of caution, he said delicately. Yeah, we've also done a little bit of work as authorities in preparing our drivers for this, so they know they're going to be ambushed, if that makes sense. If you can ambush something, you know you're going to be ambushed. I don't know. Anyway, the net result being is that we're there a little bit more prepared for it. And also there are, as we've discovered in our own little world, there are some distinct variations. So we know, for example, that the North Tyneside business model, whilst the process is exactly the same, the nature of the model that's operated in that area because of historical factors is very different to the one that's operated within Basingstoke, Hart and Rushmore. And that's a great strength of what we're doing. But again, you know, there might be other local variations that you're not particularly familiar with. So a little bit of pre-planning goes a long way in those circumstances.
Thank you. Trisha.
Hi, I'm Trisha, lead user researcher at Zysi, just supporting the background with Ash and the team. And just to add to what everyone has said around the location, I think to add to what folks have said, also in Alpha, it's just about getting indicators of if, when we go to a wider audience in the beta phase, if there are further things to find in other locations, but very much to what the others have said, like by focusing on these locations, even though they're really far for us to go to, it gives us a view of the whole problem for users, not just the drivers, but also the license holders, license officers in these locations. So we're looking at, for each location, the whole problem with all the different users in that very exact context. So that's where the value really comes in from doing this field research rather than going to random taxi stands. We have a really good view in depth of each location. And when we go to the beta phase, hopefully next, then we can start to broaden to other locations as well.
Thank you. Alex.
Yeah, just following on from what Trisha said there, yes, it's that context that's really important, so you understand perhaps what you're hearing a little better from those users. But lastly, and just on what Robert spoke about there in terms of we did prime this audience out there in the field, so taxi drivers knew what we were about when we approached them with that guerrilla research. We were warned, you know, if as we were in the Rushmore work prior to this, we were involving the licensing team in some of that research. If a taxi driver sees a licensing officer coming, they can react differently. But knowing we were doing research really helped. And another great strength with that user group is they talk to each other. So as soon as a few of them are aware that the research is going on, they're all talking about it, which is really helpful. So yeah, it's an interesting group. Ash.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to that. We were only so successful with the last round of research because of the support we had from the councils. So whether that was helping us chauffeur people to rooms, whether that was booking rooms for us, and then now for the next time, it's helping us go to the taxi ranks. We've done a lot of that priming, and a lot of emails went out to operators, to the trade, just to let them know what we're doing. But also the way we phrased it was to get their voices heard. So actually quite a lot of them were very keen to get involved. And yeah, just massive props to each of the licensing teams, because a lot of work went into that in the background and helping support us, and it would have been a lot more difficult if we didn't have that support. So yeah, thank you all.
Lovely, thank you. If that's all for questions, I know I didn't explicitly ask the questions that you see on the screen, but if you do have any questions in relation to that, please put your hand up now, or feel free to email us and we will get back to you with your question. But otherwise, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your engagement and questions, and hopefully we will see you at the next show and tell. Have a nice afternoon, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.